It's late, and I ate, sitting here a little bit bored with my cigarette and my grappa. And I thought I wanted to share a supernatural experience that I had when I was a child about a UFO. And I call it a UFO because I simply have no other name for it. An unknown aerial phenomenon. It needs a bit of context. When we were children, me and my sister and my mother sometimes swapped beds when it wasn't school. I don't know why they did that, but they did. And one summer vacation, I wanted to sleep in my mother's bed. So I whined about it, and eventually she caved and I got to sleep in my mother's bed. I'm not really sure I'm going to tell this story because I haven't thought about it in a long time. Just recently came back to my memory. I never really forgot about it though. Fucking hell. But oof, grappa vecchia. Anyway, when that evening I got to sleep in my mother's bed, and she had dogs, two, a small one and a big one. And since it was a large bed, a two-person's bed, the dog could sleep with me, and I wanted the dog to sleep with me. And in the middle of the night, I woke up because the big one was growling, and this very deep growling sound, as if he was, trying to warn something off, like trying to tell something to somebody or something. Stay there and don't come closer. It sounded. I never heard him growl like that before or after that. That was, yeah, it was a deep, unsettling growl, but it wasn't directed at me because I woke up because I could feel the vibration of the dog growling and also the sound, of course. And I wake up and I remember him staring outside of the window. And there was a strange light flickering at a very constant speed. Slow light, blue. And I didn't think anything of it at the time because I figured, well, this has to be a cop or an ambulance. And I reach out my hand, and the moment I touch the dog, it hits me like this cannot be an ambulance. This cannot be a police car. Because first it was like a two-story house, and the backyard to which my mother's bedroom window was facing, there's no street there anywhere. They're all enclosed gardens. All the houses have backyards and they're all joined like that. So there's no street. It was not a short street, so it also couldn't have been side streets. Just couldn't have. And there are also houses on that side. It just struck me that it couldn't have been either of those things. Not an ambulance, not a police car. Because their lights, and that light reminded me of it. It was the same kind of light. It's a bit lighter than cyan, but it's a bit darker than cobalt. Police light car, police light blue. And I touched the dog, and the dog doesn't move. He stays staring out the window. So I just go like, sleepy face, looking at the window, and I see where that light is coming from. Not a car, but something in the sky. A huge blue orb. It was very hard to tell how far this orb was away from our house. But to make a comparison, we had, let's say, a bit less than 10 meters of garden. At the end of that garden, we had a very large pine tree. A pine tree that was that actually its tip reached over the tip of the houses. So it was larger than a 2-story house. So, and if that was the tip of that pine tree, the orb behind it was around, this size, big. And it emitted this blue light, but at the same time, it was also luminescent. It had a light that came from within itself, that was constant. The light of the orb itself, it never changed intensity. And it wasn't just light, it was a very clear orb, very clear circumference. But the blue within the blue, it seemed like it was moving, like static, but blue, not black and white. It, I have no other way of describing this. That's the closest I can come to it. And it emitted this light that went, almost like at the rhythm of a heartbeat, no faster than that, an in rest heartbeat. And I remember I got out of bed immediately. I got out of bed and I looked at the clock, and it was 3:40, 3:42 to be precise. I know it because it was a digital clock. And I remember seeing it, 3:42. I got out of bed and I stand there at the window staring like, what the hell am I looking at? And I think I'm pretty sure I was standing there with my mouth open like, ugh. And I remember because that orb was moving from left to right. And I run downstairs because I know we had these old cameras. We had the camera somewhere in a drawer downstairs, somewhere. And I had to be fast because that orb wasn't stopping. It was moving like this. Soon I wouldn't be able to see it anymore, so I had to find the camera. And I kept half an eye on the back window, seeing if that light was still there. And when I could see it somewhat fading, I gave up my search. And this couldn't have been longer than a couple of seconds that I was going through all those drawers. But I was really going through them in a frenzy. I couldn't find the camera, and I went outside. I ran outside, actually. I ran outside barefooted in my nightgown and just staring at the sky, looking up like. And the dog, the big one, followed me. He followed me through the house. He was like glued to my leg when I was going through the drawer. And I ran to the veranda and I ran outside. And that dog never left the house. He stood there in the back door, whining at me, really like whining, like dogs do when they are in distress. He was afraid. He was. But I never felt the tiniest hint of fear, just pure. And I remember this specifically, I very, very distinctly remember thinking that this orb knew I was looking at it and didn't care. Couldn't give a fuck. But he knew I was there. It knew I was looking at it. As if it had sentience, a consciousness. But at the same time, it just couldn't be bothered with me at all. And I this is a reaction that surprises me to this day when I think back on it. When I couldn't see it anymore, I went back inside and I went right back to bed. And I woke up and all the clocks in the house had stopped. The digital ones, well, they had just stopped working altogether. All of them. All the batteries needed replacing. But the analog ones, the one that runs on battery, or the ones that you had to rewind, they had all stopped. Every single clock analog clock in the house. And this was around the time that he still had like an analog clock in almost every room. My mother just happened to have a digital one in her bedroom, and we had a digital oven clock and also one on the microwave. Those two needed to be resetted completely because they were blinking like yeah, those stripes with the dots. They were just broken or erased or something happened to them and they had to be reset. But the analog clocks all had to be rewinded or had to have their batteries changed. The one in my bedroom, I never changed the batteries on that clock. I left that clock standing on 342 for years for no reason other than I just didn't want to forget what happened that night. On that one night, that one single time that I got to sleep in my mother's bed after lots of whining, by the way. For some reason, she liked to sleep in my sister's bed, but not in mine. A whole other story. But yeah, I don't think I saw a spaceship. And if I did, it was a self-aware spaceship. It was an amazing experience. Yeah, amazing because I never felt any fear. I could see my dog was afraid, but me, no, no, not at all. I somehow think I knew that it wasn't out to hurt me in any way. It just couldn't care less. That's the feeling I got from it. That it was sentient, like it was alive. Now, I have no idea what I saw. I'm just going to be honest about it. I just thought it was a memory worth sharing. One of my most fascinating memories. It's one I sometimes still think about because what the hell was it? I have no idea at all. And it wasn't creepy. I never experienced this as creepy or scary. I was just so fascinated. I mean, mind blown, but really just, I have no words to describe what I felt at the time. I just don't. I lack the vocabulary in any language. But yeah, if you have your own UFO stories or you have any thoughts about this, feel free to share them because I'd love to hear them. Seriously. This was one of the least scary yet most fascinating paranormal experiences I ever had the pleasure of experiencing. And that was it really. There's nothing else to it at all. it came and went, and that was it. But I have a very cool memory about it. I remember telling some friends at school. I wasn't in high school yet. I was that school you go to before high school. I remember telling some friends of mine, and they just didn't want to believe me. In retrospect, I don't blame them. Who I probably wouldn't have believed me either. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. Yeah, say whatever you like.